The following is an unofficial, non-commercial Warhammer 40,000 fan production. Corvia. Written by Kieran Panchal. Based on an unofficial campaign from the Warhammer 40,000 role-playing game Dark Heresy. Chapter 3.
The same. You're not mistaken, they are the same markings. The same. We're in pursuit now. He must have slipped out of a vent or something. The blood trail is strong, but we lost him in the crowd. Keep on him. He's got nowhere else to go except the hab. Ever heard the expression, a cornered animal is the deadliest? Do your job, Acolyte. Vox me for confirmation once you're done.
The link was cut, and Victoria returned to the press of bodies that defined the C3 rush hour. The affair back at the apothecarium had ended badly, and Dahlia had needed a bioflush to remove the chemicals Pytes had pumped into her bloodstream. By all rights, she shouldn't be standing, but some force drove her on. The surgeon had performed a simple detox of her wound, clearing the area of poison and applied a binding solution to the wound, but he had attempted far more. By Dahlia's side, there was an ancient container, half opened and covered in etched scrawl Cadia recognized from the cordoned hab she had investigated. The box was sealed with iron chains and had painted on it a symbol in sea green. It was of a hydra, triple-headed, and with pointed tongues forking out from fanged mouths. Victoria had stowed the box in a carry bag before unbinding Dahlia, and now it clanged against her left leg with every stride. There was no way to tell how long the Dark Apothecary had been practicing. God Emperor only knew the damage that this one man had wrought. By Officio Munitorum standards, a community medicae and their staff were entrusted with the health of approximately 5,000 citizens. It's grok shit, Cadia had explained. C3 has 7 million people, and most of them are scrappers. No idents, no civis codes, nothing. The only ones who'll treat them are unmarked practices, like Pytes. Throne only knows how many people he's hurt. The labyrinthine streets twisted and jinked in crazed randomness, as if the city itself was conspiring to hide their quarry. The mutelings and other unnameable vermin hissed and squealed as they were scattered in their wake, writhing and slithering into cracks and sluice holes. The hab is just up ahead. Cadia indicated a particularly dilapidated tower, whose grime and rust stretched all the way down from C3's buttressed ceiling. And where are the arbiters? Victoria asked as she spied the hazard-marked cordon lines, but not a grim-faced enforcer in sight. They were told to leave. There's only one person in the building. Dahlia had come to the fore of the trio, her weak gait supported by a length of rebar which she used as a walking staff, with a tiny golden pendant dangling from its tip. You'll kill yourself if you keep on like that. Victoria's tone was its usual nonchalance. Worry about me after we catch this heretic. Dahlia had the measure of it. The nature of their quarry's transgression had morphed from a simple assault to what was now becoming clear as deviant mysticism. It had been a simple task to slip into a side alley door, once Dahlia had used her Psychana to open its primitive lock. Once inside, they activated stab lights and surveyed the festival of carnage. Furniture was overturned and smashed, the walls were splattered with obscene symbolism, and the whole building smelt of sulfur and burnt paper. On the floor were the scattered remains of bodies, whose faces and throats were reduced to diced meat. These must have been the Gilded Lion members, Cadia observed, as she saw the emblem of a lion's head, sewn in white and rust brown on some of their lapels. So where's Pytes? He's up there. 3 floors. Dahlia pointed up to the ceiling. How do you know? Victoria already knew that she wouldn't be fond of the answer. He's telling me. Conventional psychomysticism, and Victoria said as much. Dahlia's mind is just as much a weapon as your sword, Cadia said. Victoria huffed as she picked a path through the corpses, following a pungent blood trail to the stairway. Thanks, Cadia, but she won't listen to you. Cadia began, and faltered as Dahlia shook her head before cracking a weak smile.
She's just an ex-guardsman. Grumbling about psychers is what they do.
The door was an ornate thing, carved with dark winged birds fluttering about a lion's head. It was symbolic of Corvia's political position within the Gideon subsector. As capital world, Corvia was afforded a crest animal, a crow, a creature of great significance in the planet's culture. But the crest of Gideon itself, the sigil under which coins and papers were stamped, and after which the subsector's own regiment of Astra Militarum was named, was a great golden lion. It was a symbol of pride to some, and one of dread to others. But to Victoria, it was just an expensive carving. She thought nothing of tradition or symbolism as her iron-shod boot crashed into the door and ripped it from its hinges.
In the name of the Emperor's Inquisition, lay down your arms, heretic!
Victoria advanced into the room, with Cadia and Dahlia behind her. The space was dim and darkly lit, with candles burning a soft blue. The room's dimensions seemed skewed. For one, it was far longer than it should have been. The candles described a pathway, flickering like guiding sentinels against the formless black. At their termination was a form, shadowed and hunched over a burning pit. Within the pit's corpuscent flames writhed nameless, indescribable blasphemies. Eyes that spoke unholy words, fingers that stared with glee, and a million sensations too maddening to describe. The hunched figure before the fire arched its back, showing a single distended arm with pointed talons and decorated in shimmering feathers. Its head, beaked and long, pointed upwards at an angle, so its terrible profile was in full relief. Its eyes, for there were many along each side, were of varying sizes and colours, some black and beady, others green and reptilian. But what fixed on them was a human eye, brown and bloodshot. It turned, contorting itself in impossible ways to reveal the true volume of its bulk. But all this was nothing. All this physical wrongness and impossibility was conceivable, even if only through the lens of feverish madness. But when it spoke, that all fell away into blight and folly. Neither Victoria nor Cadia could understand its words. They merely gritted their teeth and unloaded a storm of gunfire. Cadia fired her father's heavy stub with ferocious precision, advancing with each roaring blast. The round sunk into its blasphemous flesh, and it was forced back into the infinite abyss, with Cadia moving steadily towards it.
Damn it, Cadia, don't take another step.
Dahlia screamed into Cadia's mind, but it was already too late. Just as the creature reached out its arm and encompassed Cadia in a cage of talons, it dragged her into the blackness, half her body already vanished into the dark.
I'm taking your other arm, you freak.
Victoria swung her blade in an upward stroke, sinking deep into the mottled feathers and flesh. The abomination's mouth opened wide, and Victoria was suddenly transfixed by the unnameable horror that lay within.
Throne on terror.
It was half a curse and half a cry, as she was forced to turn away from the insanity. She did not see the bird-like foot that sprung from below and kicked her savagely to the ground. Cadia had been shaken like a doll and lay crumpled on the floor. Now, it was slowly crushing Victoria underfoot as she struggled for breath.
Get off, you monster!
Dahlia cried, clutching her staff. The monster's beak snapped up, peeling back to reveal a hideous sneer. Snarling in hatred, the creature leaped high above her, unfurling terrible wings as it dived for its prey. Dahlia had never seen such horror before, not even in her most terrible dreams. Yet, as it approached, she felt something reach out to her. It was like a cryptic darkness that stole over her mind, whispering black secrets in a million tongues and voices. She raised the crude staff like a puppet on strings, and a tidal wave of psychic force crashed into her oncoming foe. It turned him away like a gull caught in a storm, sending him crashing back to the floor. In riposte, it unleashed a torrent of cobalt flame, but it was clumsy and travelled at a snail's crawl. As if in a dance, she turned and stepped aside, the wall of eldritch fire scorching the air beside her. There was something else at play here, something foul, but she could spare no time for thinking. The whispers were becoming clearer with every movement, and seemed to rise and fall with the duel. It lunged again, this time not from the air, but a brute charge on powerful legs. It was a close-run thing, but Dahlia stepped back only in time to avoid its thrashing talons. But now came her advantage. As her adversary scrambled to right its immensity, she turned to it. Holding the rebar like a cudgel, she brought it down on the abomination's head with a crack of telekinetic wrath. She struck it again and again, each blow like a hammer of etheric force. The final strike shattered the tiny golden pendant that clung to the staff's tip, which was now nothing more than a mangled length of steel. But the monster had fared far worse. Its head was turned to red paste, and a cavity of dark gore took the place of its neck and shoulders. Dahlia's will finally crumpled as she fell to the ground, the last of her energy spent. Her eyes wandered to the fire pit, that one spot of light in the darkness. The fire showed her things. Terrible, terrible things. She watched as a burned man, undernourished and scarred, walked out of a smoking hab block. His eyes were made of glass and shone with muzzle flash as the armored men shot him down. Then more ambled out of the building, their skin flaky and peeling. The fire showed her a vision of a scarred man in black armor, slumped in his own blood. Over him was a pale fiend with red eyes, and his gaunt face was split with a skeletal smile. She saw a great crowd of people singing in praise before bombs tore them apart. Tall men with screaming swords and red-eyed helms cut and shot the ones who tried to flee. She saw a pit infinite and merciless, beckoning for her to pitch over, to tumble down and down and down. She looked up and saw a colossus standing over her, a monster in turquoise watching her die. It bent down and clutched her throat, squeezing and squeezing. The vision vanished like smoke, and Dahlia saw the demon carcass burn, its embers floating up into the endless blackness above them. The embers rose and became stars, twinkling in the void, and she felt herself slipping into peaceful oblivion. But just before the darkness embraced her, she heard footsteps and saw the outline of armored men. One of them, a handsome man with dark hair and grey eyes, leant over Cadia.
I know this one.
His voice was muted and accompanied by a faint throbbing sound from her right ear.
By what association, Officer Braden?
Came the impatient, diminutive response. The throbbing was becoming worse, and Dahlia struggled to hear the response.
Passing one, sir. Her name is Cadia, and I've only talked to her a few times. I want a full debrief, and send her to interrogation. The rest of you, put the others in the holding cells till tomorrow. The Corvia will want a word.
Dahlia couldn't feel the hands that bore her aloft and out of that wretched room. She couldn't remember the sound of the ground transport as she was bound and locked into a holding chair, and it would be a long time before anything made sense again.